my distinct pleasure to introduce two brilliant authors and their captivating books. Brinda Charry and her novel titled The East Indian, Geetika Rudra and her book titled Here to Stay, Uncovering South Asian American History. These authors will engage in a conversation that promises to take us on a profound journey through the intricacies of the Indian American experience. The discussion will be moderated by the exceptional Sayu Bhojwani and promises to be an engaging one.
Not to my introduction, which seemed extraordinarily long. We are going to be talking about two books that are very different in form. One is a historical novel, and the other is nonfiction, but both are rooted in history and in themes of migration and belonging. Brinda has written a book that is rich in detail about landscape, with rich detail about landscapes, medicine, literary references, and American and Indian history, while Geeta's book powerfully integrates her own personal immigration journey with American history as it relates to Indian Americans. I want to share just a little bit more about Brinda's bio because it's an extraordinary, this book, well, you have a hardcover version of this book. I want to share that her book, though we already heard it was the first novel published in the United States, it's been shortlisted for the Barnes & Noble Discover Prize and longlisted for the JCB Prize. It was recommended, it goes on, recommended by the New York Times for its Summer 23 reading list, which is how I found out about it. It was a Washington Post noteworthy book for May, was on the Indie Next list issued by the American Independent Booksellers Association for May 23rd, and an Amazon's Editor's Choice pick. I'm not done yet. It was featured on NBC's Today Show and named the Book of the Week on that program, also named Guardian's Book of the Day, Sydney Morning Herald's Book of the Week, and was named by BBC as one of the 18 best books of 2023.
Wow.
Thank you. So I wanted to share that because it's, I think, quite an extraordinary feat for a book that is in many ways could be seen as a really specialized book to get this level of attention. And so I hope you all will buy it and read it. But I'm going to now ask, before we get into a conversation, I'm going to ask both Brinda and Geetika to read a little bit from their books. So why don't we start with you, Geetika?
Sure. The year was 2014. And I was researching civil rights litigation in Columbia University's Butler Library for a reporting project. I stumbled across a paragraph that described a 20th century American court case on a website. This case changed everything for me. It was heard in a courthouse in Washington State. The year was 1913. The plaintiff was the United States. The defendant, someone named A.K. Mojumdar. I caught my breath. Mojumdar is a common name in Bengal, India, the same state where my father was born. I knew many people in Queens with the last name Mojumdar, but they all had recently arrived here. As far as I knew, the history of people from modern-day India and the United States didn't begin until the 1960s at the earliest. Here was evidence telling me otherwise and staring me right in the face. Even more interesting to me was that this court case was centered on Mojumdar's citizenship. I realized that since there was a South Asian man trying to become a citizen of the United States in 1913, there must have been other South Asian characters in American history.
So, a witch was hanged 4 weeks into our voyage to Virginia. After it was over, they hauled the body down and flung it into the water. Captain Cox trundled back to his cabin, and they shooed us down to the hold, which stank of stale food, sweat, and vomit, but which was at least rid of the witch's envy and spite. We went on our way, breasting the grey-white waves, the ship mourning like a living beast, the winds pushing us briskly westwards. It has been many years now since that crossing, but in my mind, she still stands there, forever looking out at the waters, forever asking me my name, forever failing to reach her journey's end, and I, forever poised at the start of my own voyage. It was the year of our Lord 1635, and I, Tony, the East Indian, was the first of my kind, so they say, to reach America.
And I'd love for you to just talk about that, the decision-making process to land at the genre that you chose, and also this through line of Tony in your book, and the through line of Mazumdar and later Thind in your books. So we can give Brinda a minute to catch her breath, and you can start if you like, Geetika.
Sure.
And as far as we can tell, this young man, Tony, was brought in by the Englishman, George Menefee, as an indentured servant. His journey, Tony's journey, was probably India. With an East India Company official, he makes his way to London, and from London, he makes his way to Virginia. And I found and I decided, why fiction? I guess the simple answer is I enjoy writing fiction. I mean, I'm an academic by training, and I've done a lot of nonfiction, but fiction is my first love. It's my first language, really.
That are remarkably detailed around kind of, let's call it medical research, because one of the things that happens is that Tony, becomes an apprentice to a doctor. And I was really fascinated by this medical research, and like that's something that you had to research, or you sort of had the basic information about?
I had to research. I mean, when I said I'm well versed in the time period, I'm really well versed in England, honestly. Oddly enough, it's not even India of the time period that's my area of expertise. It's really England of the time period. And no, I had to research the Virginia part of it, and certainly the medicine, and I read. In fact, reading and research took longer.
I guess similarly, I love nonfiction and writing nonfiction. I think there's a very interesting creative tension in being constrained by facts. That it's a challenge I've always found appealing. I studied creative writing, but as a reporter at ABC, there was just something very satisfying at being able to discover, not necessarily create the narrative, because in a way the narrative exists. It's your job as the reporter, as later as a historian, I guess, is the role that I played in this book, or with this book, to just uncover what had happened and do your best to find the most fact, the most context, the most clues, so to speak, to give light to the story as it had existed.
Christianity came to India way before it came to the West. And my protagonist starts his journey in Madras. And we know that Saint Thomas, the apostle of Christ, right, made his way to Madras. And so there is a very, very old, I do not like this idea that Christianity is a sort of colonial imposition on India. It is an Indian religion as much as any other religion. And he's exposed to Christianity even back in India, and is very moved by the story of St. Thomas. And eventually his conversion is quite willing and quite natural, but it has to happen. And at that point in time, I do not believe there could have been any other cause in the year 1635. Yeah.
Well, and in Tony's case, he arrives at a time when Indian means something very different here.
Yeah. In fact, it meant very little to Westerners, because India did not exist in the year 1635, right? What you have is a bunch of kingdoms and principalities, and my protagonist thinks of himself as a Tamil boy, and there is no evidence, by the way, that the historical Tony is Tamil. I am Tamil, so I decided he will be Tamil. And so he thinks of himself as a Tamil boy, and he doesn't think of himself as Indian. He doesn't think of himself as Hindu, for that matter. He's simply the Tamil boy from a certain part of, which is really near from Mylapore, which is here where he starts his journey. And he is, others who meet him, the white people, they're not sure what to make of him, because again, Indian as a race did not exist. And it's pretty interesting if you look at the narratives of the time period. The term used for the people of my people, of most of us here, is really a very, very shifting term. They are sometimes simply called Moors, sometimes black Moors, in certain cases black Moors, so there's a real, and so he is called all of these things, and then eventually the term East Indian comes into being, largely to differentiate from natives of the Americas, and so the term East Indian, and he doesn't think of himself as any of this till he gets to London, and then people start to sort of clump him, along with other people who they think look something like him. And so it's only in London he realizes he is East Indian, and even then he's confused. He says, they're much lighter than me, it's a different religion than me, why are they putting us together?
Well, and I definitely want to open it up to you all for questions, and I have one more question, but just a point that I want to make about that is like, when we unpack that in terms of class and where solid, whether
Yes.
it's class as in the class you belong to or the class mobility that you want to have, and how that intersects with decisions around which
Yes.
communities you marry into.
Yep. And add on to your ability to pass.
Right.
And just very little how light your skin is, and the men who I discovered who were lighter skin tone were the ones marrying into white communities, and I think there is significance behind that, and that the color of your skin literally, and I think it's true to this day, does let you have certain access across not just racial lines but class lines, versus I think people of darker skin tones.
So I think we have overextended
like
our
we have.
period of welcome. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you.